Hey, everybody, it's Andrea Paquette, co-founder and president of the Stigma-Free Society. Hope everyone is doing well today. We're very excited as we have an amazing guest who is going to talk with us today about agricultural, mental health, and so many other things. So Brendan, thank you so much for being here.
No problem at all. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, definitely. And I thought I'd just first tell people about Stigma-Free Society, that we are a charity based out of Vancouver. As of late, we launched our Rural Mental Wellness Toolkit, and we are engaging farmers and people from the agricultural and remote communities to come and talk to us about personal experience, mental health, and related matters as well. As Stigma Free, we are dedicated to creating awareness around the various stigmas with a focus on mental health, creating understanding, and as many of you know, the acceptance of ourselves and other people. So I'm first going to start off with a bio, Brendan, and it's a little bit long, so I hope that's okay because there's a lot of things I'd like to share about you, as there's many awesome things. Sound good?
Sure,
All
you
right.
can cut out whatever you want or leave in whatever you want.
No, it's great. Okay, so Brendan is the manager of Byrne Brothers farming operation. Byrne Brothers was founded by his father and uncles and is currently operating 1,100 acres of corn, soybeans, and wheat. Brendan works on the farm with his father and hopes to inspire his children and nephews and nieces to discover the benefits of life on the farm. He's the local director for District 1 Essex of the Grain Farmers of Ontario and the current provincial chair. In his spare time, he is an avid reader. He loves self-improvement and philosophy books. Well, that's unique, philosophy. I like that. And can also be found reading popular fiction. He's an avid sports fan and still follows his childhood teams, the Edmonton Oilers, Detroit Tigers, and Washington football team. Welcome, Brandon. I think there's a lot of things that I can touch on in there. But first and foremost, I was wondering if you could do a little bit further of an introduction of yourself and your experience, perhaps, of working in the ag field, and anything you'd like to share that people may want to know.
Sure. Yeah, as I said, it's Brendan Byrne. I'm the chair of the Grain Farmers of Ontario. I live in Essex, which is basically, I can see the Windsor, Detroit border from where my backyard is. So I'm close to the American side as well. I grew up on a farm, 100 acres that my parents still live on around the corner, live on a farm with my wife and 2 kids here. And I got an honors business and economics degree, did not set out to be farming. I had that attitude of I'll go and do a bunch of other stuff. At the time, the commodity prices were not great. So parents were more than happy to see me go out and do some other things, but came back to it probably 17, 18 years ago, I guess now. And I've been managing the family farm since then, and have got involved in provincial organizations and local agricultural groups and our rural community in general. So it's kind of a little bit of a background there.
I like that. And so you said you set out first to do what when you were going to school?
I got a business and economics degree, and I think I set out to just be some sort of a business person. I wasn't sure exactly what that entailed. So I found a use for a lot of the stuff on farm after the fact, but I think a lot of people kind of think of the farm as just general labor, day-to-day stuff, but there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes as well that we know our degrees are well paid for and helped kind of push our industry and our businesses along.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's a business. And I think maybe a lot of people forget that component and really needs that structure and leadership. So that's really neat. What prompted you to want to go back to the farm? Like, what was it?
It was just there was a change in kind of the business structure that was going on with our particular farm. And my dad just kind of came to me the one time, and I was looking for a new challenge. And he said, you know what, if you're interested, yeah, there's a spot for you to come back and manage this, and it will give you'll be really busy in the spring and fall. We don't have animals, so the rest of the time will kind of be yours to continue to do other things as well. So in and around it, I came back. It took a while to get my feet and try to figure out what was going on our farm, let alone anywhere else. And in between was able to do some other still produce kind of independent films and music videos and stuff down here with a business partner. And eventually it just led to continuing down this path of involvement in provincial organizations.
Excellent. I was reading in your bio something that stood out to me and I think is really special, talking about how.
Where I got to be the chair of GFO at this point.
Oh, okay. Oh, sorry. It's just a little bit of a delay. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, I can.
Okay. And so one thing I was going to ask you is about the roots of agricultural work running deep in your family. And why is it important for you to pass on this passion to your children and other young people in your family? What is that about?
I think for me in general, in my high school or even like in my grade school, I would see kind of an exodus of people leaving small towns to head to the city. And it was always that there was more opportunity there to be found. And I always found that in some of the larger cities, it was also easier to just get kind of swallowed up or disappear in there. And in small communities, you have more of a chance to make a big impact on people. And I've always found that whenever I've been in the bigger cities, I couldn't wait to get back home and into the smaller rural communities. And I just have kind of a passion for my kids in general to do whatever they want to do. The farm will still be here no matter what. I've told them that. So pursue whatever your passion is. And if it ends up being agriculture, that's great, or anything that ties into it. But make sure they kind of go after what they'd like to do as well.
Yeah, that's really important. And so I was wanting to talk about mental health. That's why we're here today. And I was wondering, at first, I'd really like to touch on mental health and the rural communities, the agricultural communities. And I was wondering if you could share, how is that topic handled and the experience of people that you've come into contact with in these communities when it comes to mental health awareness or getting help. Is there something you would like to share with people about that, just to give us some knowledge?
Sure. I think in terms of rural communities, there is kind of a disconnect between, I guess, wanting help and then being able to find it, because the resources aren't necessarily there. And I know in our farming community, we have kind of the reputation as being resilient. We have this like we're strong. We kind of roll with the punches. We keep going forward. But we had a few different incidents happen on farm in Ontario, and one of which was a good friend of mine who was an advocate for agriculture who took her own life a few years back, and nobody had any idea that she was struggling as badly as she was. And it kind of opened up a conversation for a lot of different people around that mental health. And you know what, like I didn't see that coming, and others saying, well, I talked to her a lot and I know she was having a struggle, but couldn't quite grasp where she was with it or where she could get help. And I know that we've came a long way in probably the last 4 or 5 years just in opening the conversation, but we still have a long way, like a long road to go in terms of actual help that people will understand on farm. There's a lot of differences. You can't just take some time off work. In some cases where people have animals they have to care for, and they would get that recommendation when they ask for help, and they're like, they just don't understand what happens on a farm. So there has been a push to maybe get some more people that are in smaller communities that know what's going on in agriculture to be able to reach out and speak with them. But there's a lot of room to grow there for sure.
Definitely. And one thing I'm going to share with you after we're off the call is we have the peer support training for rural communities. And yeah, this is really wonderful for agricultural communities or people who have lived experience, not necessarily with mental illness, but facing mental health challenges or similar challenges in communities. And I'd love to share that with you, as so many people have found it very useful to create support that might not necessarily be clinical, but within communities with each other. So I think that's very important to have that within communities. Do you find there's greater support in from what you've seen in smaller communities and rural communities? How is that whole topic around mental health? Like, how do people support each other that you've seen?
Well, I know once the conversations kind of opened up a little bit, it did kind of include, like, you know what, and this was before COVID hit, I guess. it was kind of that reminder of, if you haven't seen so and so in a while, or you haven't heard from them, maybe check in and just see how they're doing. Pop by their operation and check in on some people, and you would find that there were people doing that. They were making sure, you know what, I haven't heard from my friends, so I'm just going to reach out and see how they're doing. And that was a good starting point, because for the most part, people weren't really open with how they were dealing with their mental health in many cases. And on farm, I mean, I can tell you now, like, we're into another wet harvest here. There's millions of dollars a crop out in the farms, and having a tough time getting it off. Bills keep coming in no matter what. And there's a lot of stress that goes on, and a lot of the operations are run by individuals. They don't have like 10 employees that they can kind of pass work off or like share the stories. So it's a big deal to reach out and have that connection amongst the farm community, because a lot of people are working alone for long stretches of time.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I was also wondering, did you have perhaps anything you'd like to share about your own mental health or well-being? How, living in an agricultural community, or, how this has affected you personally?
Yeah, like I've been open in my case of it's not necessarily myself, but my wife has dealt with mental health issues that really came hard in the last 4 years. So we've had very open discussions with our two teenage kids as to what exactly is happening with mom's mental health, when she had a big kind of collapse and is still continuing on with it. So I think in part I get asked to maybe do some of these conversations, because I've been pretty open with, you know what, we need to get to the point where if you break your foot, you get a cast, and everybody just kind of says, okay, like, that's what you do. That if you have a mental health problem, you reach out and try to get help, because that's what you should do. And in my case, and we go back to that philosophy type thing that was mentioned earlier, is I know I came across a few books by Ryan Holiday that just gave me this stoic kind of, there's an event, and it's how you react to the event that determines how it is. So I've tried to keep things kind of that way, like, okay, something's happened here, but what can I control and what can't I? And I found that's helped in my own personal mental health. If I can't necessarily control it, I try to not let it bother me as much as maybe it should or could.
Yeah. I know that is a really good philosophy. I've even adopted that in my own life. There's only so much you can control, right?
Yeah.
And you can only do your best. And I think really that would resonate with a lot of people. What did you find helpful in like helping your wife? Like, what kinds of things stood out to you that were really useful? Because there's a lot of viewers out there who have family members who deal with mental health issues, and they just feel lost.
Well, and I think that if they feel that way, I can certainly sympathize, because we often look at it from the person experiencing mental health, but oftentimes that person experiencing it trickles into all the family around them, their coworkers, everybody that is there to support them, kind of feels lost at times too. So I know in our case, it's meant many appointments. It's meant some hospitalization. It's meant sitting down and having tough conversations with your kids about where mom's going to be for a little bit. But it's trying to normalize that as best possible, be as supportive as you can. There's a lot of different advice that you'll get from a lot of different people, and it's the same almost as when you have a new child, and everybody's going to tell you what you need to do and this is how it should go. You really have no idea until you get in the middle of it and are experiencing it for yourself, because everybody reacts differently to their own mental health issues, and you can only do so much. But providing support is a key.
Yeah, no, that's imperative. And so when you were talking, it was really interesting because I related when you were talking about my mom also has a mental illness. When I was growing up, I didn't know, and nobody talked to me about it. And especially when she would disappear for 2 weeks to go to the hospital, it was just this mom is sick. There was no
Sure.
explanation why and what was happening. So I love that, in family environments, we're talking more about this. And I was curious, as you were, talking about your children and such, and how can you break down stigma in the home? Like, how does somebody do that? Like, do you have any advice or knowledge or things that you've come across?
I think in general, a lot of times people just try to be secretive and hide everything from, say, kids or spouses as to what's going on. I think if you can be honest with them, just in general, and putting it in, like with our kids, it was kind of putting it in that terms that I said earlier. You know what? If somebody got into an accident and they were in the hospital for 2 weeks, you would never question it. That's exactly where they should be. And in this case, that was the same type of thing. And I think that it also helped to show. My wife was in the same case as you, where her mother had a mental illness and still does, and is still dealing with. And it starts to explain why certain things have happened certain ways. And then by doing that, it takes less of the, I guess, taking it personal away. So in terms of kids, you want them to know that this isn't you that did anything, or this isn't the reaction somebody gave you, is not exactly what it should be, but this is why. And once they maybe bridge that, I know even for myself, once I got more of an understanding of bipolar disorder and things like that, you could then say, okay, you read a book on it and you say, this is weird because it sounds like they're telling me everything about my wife's situation, but this is written as a general book for anybody to get brought up to speed. And it offered a lot of clarity, versus just kind of hiding it away and not sure how to go about it. So at times you kind of invest in, okay, what is this illness and what can we do and what we can't do, and try to be as honest as possible with the people around that somebody's struggling, and not to take it personal.
Yeah, definitely. And educating ourselves is so imperative, right? And like you're talking about those books and just getting the information of what the illness is, how it affects people. There's guides out there.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's really helpful. And it's a good place to start for sure. So taking stigma outside into the community and agricultural communities. I know we touched on it a little bit, but have you seen a lot of that where you live, or how has that been approached in the community?
I know in general at some of the meetings that we've had, we did have a mental health counselor came and spoke to one of the farm meetings, and I know that at times you get a handful of people that will walk out, but then you'll also get a handful of people after that was like, you don't really expect them to, but they're like, they make a point of thanking you because it meant something to them. And then you're breaking down some of those walls a little bit, and you're understanding that okay, I know that it goes on in the rural community, but I also know now that there's other people that maybe have some tools to cope with it. They have a little extra information, a little more empathy for some of the people around them. And I get a little worried with all the COVID stuff that's happened, just how some of our rural communities will, how their mental health is now, how it'll be coming out of this, because those little small touches of coffee shops for older farmers and things like that connected them weren't necessarily there. And in some cases, they were on their own at their house and didn't have a lot of family in this area. And I think that you'd be cognizant of that as well in rural communities, that we're a little further spaced out in our houses and whatnot. So it's not as easy as check in on your next door neighbor who's right next door. Sometimes it's, oh, okay, so and so, but they're about half an hour away and I haven't seen them in a year because of how this is operated. So
Wow. Yeah. So when it comes to getting help in rural communities, agricultural communities, what can people do? Like, I know there's limited resources, and I've heard so many times about the coffee table and about cafes, and people will meet in these places, and it's really difficult how COVID has affected this whole situation of people being able to connect. But is there any recommendations of how people can support themselves in these communities?
I think in general is kind of know what your limits are. If there is something that really feels wrong, make sure you get help or reach out to even your family doctor just to have a discussion. In some cases, if you do have family around, you can maybe check in on them, or at this point now with kind of vaccines rolled out, maybe there is some more visiting that's able to go on. But it is kind of that main point of just letting people know that they're not alone, even though they may feel it, and welcoming them to that. You know what, we're all in this together, especially in the farm community when, like in this case, we've got basically widespread weather events across the whole province. So it's not like it's just my area that isn't fully done harvest and would hope to be. At times you can maybe pull people together that way and just saying, you know what, you're experiencing this and so am I, and we can commiserate on it and feel a little bit better that that we're in the same boat and we're kind of pulling in the same direction.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. And I was also curious, like I didn't talk too much yet about the Grain Farmers of Ontario and your role as provincial chair, just switching gears for a moment here. And I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit about those positions, and is there any connection to the work of mental health? If not, so how do you go about your day to day in these roles?
Yeah, like we started probably around the same time as losing my friend in agriculture, that we started to have discussions at GFO around, okay, is there something we could be doing for mental health and trying to help? So we had Do More Ag came in and did a presentation to us as well with our delegate body, which is about 150, to kind of kick off the dialogue in a way that we were already there for a different event, and then here's the speaker. So it wasn't like a you know what, sign up for a mental health piece and come, because in those cases it's hard sometimes for people to sign up and put their face in front of it and say that they're there for whatever reason. But we, our HR department has, we've had some health and wellness, different initiatives and stuff on the farm that we've put forward. I know it's been fairly well received just by, we've been bringing it up at our different events that we have. We kind of always touch on it. And I know it was probably at the very beginning of the whole thing. I was at somewhere and I had done probably a 45-minute presentation. I think the mental health part was less than 2 minutes in it. And somebody at the end kind of came over and was like, I don't get why you guys are wasting so much time on this mental health issue. And I remember it was an older guy. And I said, I just don't want you to learn about mental health in the same way that I had to learn about it, by losing a friend and by having to take my wife into the hospital. And I just look out for kind of you and maybe the people around you and your family, that so that you don't have to go through that. And it was one of those where they kind of look at you and they're just kind of like, fair enough. They shake their head and they understand. So you can make some of those pieces, and we've done good work at GFO, and we'll continue to kind of bring that to the forefront in terms of how to get help, what are maybe some things to watch out for if you're feeling stress or different things, through our magazine and our email and different events.
Amazing. As well, I was curious about how do you suggest people can stay well? Like, are there certain things that you do for yourself or to support your wife to have that ongoing management of mental health maintenance, especially for people in the rural communities, as they, you know, they face a very different reality than urban counterparts? So is there things that people can do?
I think in general, like we talked about before, you got to kind of know your limits as to what you can handle for somebody and what you can't. And I know when COVID hit and everybody was kind of locked in the house here, and my wife was here the whole time, my kids were here the whole time. Even for me, it was like some of the coldest days we'd had in the winter. And I'm like, well, I'm just going to bundle up and go for a long walk here through the field, put on an audio book and just kind of disappear for 45 minutes and come back to it. And I think in some cases we undervalue some of the little self-care pieces, whether it's just, you know what, take 10 minutes and just sit in the parking lot by yourself before you venture on to the next meeting, or get home and have to maybe face an obstacle with a child or a spouse that you have to go through. But carving out little bits of time for yourself and just continuing on with what you're doing. Because even with our kids, that was kind of a discussion we had, was that mom's going through a mental health piece, and the best thing you can do is keep up your end of the bargain by staying and doing all your schoolwork, making sure all that's taken care of. And that's going to be something that's going to maybe provide a spark of joy to the other person that's struggling, versus everybody kind of being brought down by one person's mental health struggles. So I think if you can do that a little bit, carve out some time for yourself, however that is, it's different for everybody. Self-care is different for everybody, but we all kind of know, you know what, if I had a half an hour and I just wanted to enjoy that half an hour, this is what I would do, whether it's music or TV, or I'm a huge fan of naps. So it's all those little pieces and whatever works for you.
Yeah. And so just to close off a little bit here, I have like one or two more questions for you. What kind of advice can you give to somebody in a rural community who is struggling with their mental health? They're starting that mental health journey. It's hard. Do you have some words of inspiration or wisdom that you can offer?
I guess the biggest thing is that you're clearly not alone. You see all these discussions everywhere on mental health nowadays, whether it's news or newspapers or podcasts or different things. So find out kind of where you're at with your mental health, and at the same time know that it can get better. The cautionary piece in me is also pointing out that it can take a long time. It's not always an easy fix, like we say with a broken bone or something like that. But sometimes it takes multiple medication changes. Sometimes it takes, you know what, this just didn't work. Sometimes it's just a different time of year. Like we're coming up on a time where we're going to set the clocks back and it's going to be dark at 5 o'clock. And that's not easy for a lot of people. So just try to hang in there, find some help and resources where they are, be open and talk to people around you. Because I think sometimes once you put it out, you realize for sure that you're not alone. I think at times you think you are, and then you're like, you know what, I'm really struggling with this. And then you got 5 other people that are like, turn their head quick and are like, so am I, or I've had the same thing, or my spouse has. And you can kind of connect that way and maybe get some input or some resources and just keep working through it.
That's brilliant. Thank you so very much. I think this is coming to a close. Do you have anything else to add? You feeling good?
No, I'm good with it. And I'm glad, thankful for you for the forum. I think that we have a lot of work to do in destigmatizing mental health. And I think that it's conversations like this that certainly help people along the way to come to grips with, you know what, I've got an issue here, or you know what, I'm kind of seeing some pieces that I don't like in a family member or a neighbor, and then reaching out and checking in. And a lot of the stigma we can start to evaporate it a bit by doing some of these small pieces.
Yeah, no. Well, thank you so much for your insight, feedback, and being here today. We're very appreciative of your knowledge and everything that you've shared with our viewers. So thank you.
No
And
problem.
yeah, hopefully we'll see you again soon. And I also wanted to remind everybody to visit our toolkit, which is specific for rural communities, the ruralmentalwellness.com. We have many inspiring stories where people share about their journey or family members or people that they know and some of their knowledge from lived experience. We have conversation cards, for instance, for families to talk about mental health, to an array of resources that are available online and that people can do with their loved ones. And again, peer support for rural residents. We're always willing to help here at Stigma Free. One last thing I was going to ask you, Brendan, is where do people find you? Like if they want to find out more about the grain farmers of Ontario or some of the work that you're doing, is there any place that you would want to direct people?
Yeah, if you punch up Grain Farmers of Ontario and my name, it'll come up. And I'm generally Hey Brendan, so HeyBrendan on Instagram and Twitter and all that. And yeah, anybody can reach out anytime. And I try to be as positive as possible with different quotes and things like that on Instagram. Twitter's more for kind of the farm community. But yeah, I'm easy to find if somebody's looking for me.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody who is watching currently or will watch after the fact. We really appreciate your participation in Stigma-Free Society's live events. And I hope everybody has a lovely, wonderful day. Thank you.